Welcome to part 3 of our super simple beginner-friendly Python for data science series. In this session, we are building on the core Python skills you will need for data science, data analysis, big data, machine learning, and AI. If you haven't already, be sure to watch part 1 and part 2 of this series, where we covered essential Python basics like variables, operators, data types such as numbers, strings, and lists. In part 3, we'll focus on Python dictionaries, the if conditional statement, while loop, and the for loops. I'm Bright, your coach for this session, so let's dive right in and keep learning. Python dictionaries store data values in key value pair. Dictionaries are ordered, changeable, and do not allow duplicate. So supposing we have the variable student info and we assign and we create a dictionary like so, you will notice that we have the key name and the value George White, which is a string, assigned to it or mapped to it. We have the key age with the value 21 mapped to it. 21 is an integer. You notice the value for gender and origin, which are also strings, male and reverse. Now notice the value for registered courses. You have a list mapped to register courses, a list of subjects including maths, English, and geography. Now we can print the student info like so. So this gives us the values of that dictionary. Dictionaries do not allow for duplicate. If you have a duplicate value in a dictionary, it will override the existing value. So if we have a student variable like so, and notice that we have the key age, the initial value of the key age, which is 21. Now we have a duplicate value for that key age to be 35. If we run this, if we print that information, to notice that the value of age is now 35, overriding the existing value that was 21. We can use the length method to get the number of items in a dictionary, like so. If we say print length student, print length student info, and we run this, we are going to get 5 because there are 5 items in that dictionary. Can use the get method to get the value of a key in a dictionary. So if we have a dictionary like so student info, we can say something like this. We can create a variable. Let's say x is equal to, we assign student info dot get, and what we want to get is the gender. We want to get the value of the key gender. So if we print x like that, we are going to get male. We can also use square brackets or indexing to get the value of a key. So if we say y, if we create the variable y and assign student info using the square bracket with gender, we can get the value that is mapped to this key gender. If we run this again, so we get the value male. We can get a list of all the keys in a dictionary using the keys method. So if we say x and we assign student.info.keys, we can point x to get a list of all the dictionaries, to get a list of all the keys in that dictionaries. We can update a dictionary using square bracket. So let's add the university attended by this student. So we can say student info using square bracket with university graduated from, which is the key, and we map photo to that key. We can print student info to see and the update like so. So noticed university graduated from, and then the value mapped to the key university graduated from. Just like we did with keys, we can get a list of all the values in the dictionary using the .values method like so. We say print student info .values. If we run this, so we have a list of all the values in that dictionary. To get a list of the key value pair of that dictionary, we can use the item method. So let's say print again with the item method embedded in it. So we say print student info.items. If we run this, we'll get a list of value. We get a list of the value key pairs. We can use this square brackets to change the value of a key in a dictionary. So if we say student info, we use a square bracket. Let's say we want to change the age, the value of the key age to, let's say, let the age be 55. So we can print student info to see an updated version that reflects that change. If we run this, we see that the age has been changed to 55. Just like we did using a square bracket, we can also use the update method to achieve the same purpose of changing or updating the values of a key in a dictionary. So if we say student info dot, we use the update method. Inside the update method, we are going to use a curly bracket to access the key and then effect the change that we want. Let's use age again. Let's say now I want to change the age to, let's say, 100. So inside the curly bracket, we use age and then use a semicolon to effect that we want to update that dictionary to 100. So if we print student info, student info, we are missing a thing there. You notice that again, the age has been changed from 55 to 100. We can use the pop method to remove items with specific keys. So supposing we have again our student info, we say dot pop, and we say we want to remove, let's remove age from that dictionary. So if we print student info, let's see the result. So you notice that age is no longer in that dictionary. If statement in Python is a conditional statement that executes a block of code if a specific condition is true. So supposing we have x and assign it to 55, and then let's have an if statement. Let's say if x is greater than 20. Now we end that if statement with a colon. So you notice the colon there. Now the block of code under the if statement comes indented, or it does not start at the beginning of the line. So let's print yes, 55 is greater than 20. So what this does is that the code checks if x, which is 55, is greater than 20. If true, it prints yes, 55 is greater than 20. So let's run this. So it says yes, 55 is greater than 20. Let's have another code that starts at the beginning of the line. Let's say print I am not part of the if statement. Now, notice that this print statement I just showed is outside the block of code for the if statement. Now, these I am not part of the if statement will run regardless of the condition because it is not part of the block of code under the if statement. So if we run this, you see, yes, 55 is greater than 20 runs because x, which is 55, is greater than 20. I am not part of this if statement also run because this is outside the if statement. Now suppose if we say x is greater than 100, we say x is greater than 100 and we run that, you will see the first print statement there does not run because this if statement it is not true. So let's check the code we have here. We assign 55 to x, and then we have an if statement which says if x is greater than 55 and ends with a colon as it should be. We see the block of code under the if statement. It says print yes, it is. Now, because this if statement is false, the condition under it, the block of code under it will not run. It says if x is greater than 55. Now we have another statement there, the elif statement. It says elif x is equal to. Now this double equal sign in Python is the equality sign. Remember, this equality sign in mathematics is an assignment in Python. But when you have two of it, it is what is actually the equal sign. So here we say elif x is equal to 55. Now, elif in Python is a short form of else if. It allows you to check another condition if the initial if condition is false. So we have the initial if condition here, if x is greater than 55, which is actually false. But this elif will run if this one is false. And here we have x is equal to 55, which is true. So let's run this code. So it runs x is equal to 55. Now, supposing the initial if statement is true, let's say rather than if x is greater than 55, let's say x is greater than 13, which is true. So if we run this, you see the first condition runs alone. Yes, it is, because the elif condition only runs if the initial if statement is false. Okay. Let's look at the block of code we have here. First, we assign 55 to x, and we have the first if statement, if x is equal to 20. Now, the block of code under this if statement says print x is 20. Now, this condition will only run if, this code will only run if this condition is true, but it is false. X is not equal to 20, x is 55. So this code will not, this print x will not run. Now, the next condition there is elif x is equal to 15. This elif runs if the initial if condition is false. But here we have x is equal to 15, which is also false. So the block of code print x is 15 will not run. Now we have another elif statement. Here it says elif x is equal to 25, which is also false. And so the block of code under it won't run. But we have an else statement. The else statement in Python executes a block of code when the preceding if or elif conditions are false. Here we have print x, else print x is still unknown. So if we run this, we see that the else condition runs because all the preceding elif and if statements were false. And in Python, it's a logical operation that returns true if both conditions are true, while or returns true if at least one condition is true. Now let's look at this code. We have 5 assigned to x, 15 assigned to y, and 20 assigned to z. The if statement checks two conditions, x greater than y, that is 5 greater than 15, which is false. Then it also checks the second condition, y less than z, which is true. But here we have and in and, this overall condition is false, because for and to be true, the two conditions involved here has to be true. So since this overall condition is false, the block of code under it will not execute. Rather, the else prints at least one condition is false will be executed. So we have it here, at least one condition is false. So let's check this line of code with 5 still assigned to x, 15 assigned to y, and 20 assigned to z. Now, the if statement checks two conditions here, just like before. If x is greater than y, and then it checks y less than z. But the overall condition here is an or. And in an or condition, if one of these two conditions is true, the overall condition is true. Or is only false if both conditions are false. But here we have y is less than z, which is true. So the overall condition is true. And then the block of code prints at least one condition is true will run. So if we have that, it prints at least one condition is true. In Python, we have two types of loop, the while loop and the for loop. A while loop in Python repeatedly executes a block of code as long as a specified condition remains true. Okay, let's look at the block of code that we have here. Here we have 1 assigned to x. That is to say that x is initialized to 1. That is what we are saying here. We are initializing x to 1 or assigning 1 to x. Now, the while loop here, while x is less than 5. The while loop in this line of code, we check if x is less than 5. If x is actually less than 5, it will enter the loop. Now, in the loop, once it enters the loops or once it gets inside the loop, it will print you are not doing well. Now, the next line of code we have here is an incrementation of x by 1, or we increase the value of x by 1. Now, x plus 1 means that the value of x is 1. We add it by 1, which is 2, and then assign it to 2, so that the current value of x at this point will be true. Now, this step continues to repeat itself until x is no longer less than 5. That is, x has reached 5. So if we run this code, you see it prints you're doing well 4 times. The initial you're doing well is when x is equal to 1. It will enter the loop. The next one is we increment x by 1. That is, at this point, x is equal to 2. It will print you're doing well. Then the next one is when x is equal to 3. It will print you're doing well. Now, x is equal to 4. It will print you're doing well. Once x is equal to 5, the code will stop executing. Let's look at the block of code we have here. First of all, we have x is initialized as 1 or initialized to 1. That is to say that we assign 1 to x. Then we have the while loop. The while loop here check if x is less than 5. If it is true that x is less than 5, it enters the loop. Now, inside the loop, we have another condition, the if condition. The if condition here checks if x is even by using the modulo operator. Now, if x is even, it prints x is even. But otherwise, or in the case where this if condition does not equal 0, then this else condition here we run, and then it will print x is odd. Then the nice line of code here is the incrementation of x, that we say x is equal to x plus 1. Now, here x is 1. We now add 1 to it where x becomes 2. And then assign it to x, such that the new value of x will now be 2. Now, this whole loop continues to run until when x is no longer less than 5. In that case, it will not enter the loop. A for loop in Python executes a piece of code repeatedly for a certain number of times based on a sequence. This sequence could be ordered lists, dictionaries, tuple, sets, or strings. Unlike the case of a while loop, which keeps executing a block of code until a certain condition is true. To construct a for loop, we will need the for keyword, a variable, the in keyword, the range function used to create a sequence of number, the code to be executed repeatedly. Let's look at the block of code we have here. First of all, we have a list, color lists, created with 4 color strings, black, blue, green, black, blue, brown, and green. We have the for loop that iterates over these elements color list. We have for x in color list. What this does is that this variable iterates over the color list, picking each of the colors black, blue, brown, and green. Now, in the for loop, it prints you are doing well for each iteration. That is, once this variable x picks black, it prints you're doing well. It picks blue, it prints you're doing well. It picks brown, it prints you're doing well. It picks green, it prints you're doing well. So if you run this, you have you're doing well 4 times for each of the iteration of these colors. Now, the colors in the list don't affect the output because they are not used in the print statement. If we want to print the colors, we are going to use print x because x actually picks each of these colors. So if we say print x, we are going to get each of the colors for each iteration. So you see, you're doing well for each color black, you're doing well for blue. But in the code that we have here for y in welcome, print y. Here, the for loop iterates over each character in the string welcome. Remember, the variable y picks each of the characters w-e-l and so on in the strings. Now, inside the loop, it prints each characters of y, which are the characters of the strings, on a new line, like so. So you have w-e-l, c, and so on. So let's look at the code for x. For x in range 5, print x. Now, range 5 generates a sequence of number from 0 to 4. 5 is excluded, and x, the variable, picks this range of numbers. Now, the for loop iterates over each number x in this sequence. Inside the loop, it prints the current value of x, like so. So the value of x is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are the values you have in range 5. Let's look at this line of code for x in range 2, 5, print x. The range 2 to 5 generates a sequence of numbers starting from 2 up to but not including 5. The for loop iterates over each number x. Remember, the number s grabs the values of the range, the values that are in this range 2 to 5. Now, the for loop iterates over each number of x in this sequence. Inside the loop, it prints the current value of x, like so. So we have 2, 3, and 4. Look at the code that we have here. For x in range 2, 20, 2, print x. Now, the range 222 generates a sequence of numbers starting from 2, the first argument, up to but not including 20. which is the second argument, with a step size of 2, the third argument, meaning each number increases by 2. The for loop iterates over each number x. Remember, x grabs the values of the numbers in the range in the sequence. Inside the loop, it prints the current value of x, like so, 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. Now we have a dictionary, student info. We can use the for loop to iterate over this dictionary like so. So if we iterate over it, we'll have name, age, gender, origin, and registered course. This iteration using the for loops gives us the keys that are in this dictionary. If we have the student info dictionary with the key value pair, we can say for x in student info, which retrieves the keys, and then to get the keys, we can use the square bracket. The square bracket of x will retrieve the values of those keys. So if we run this, so you see we have the values of the key. The values of the key name is George White. And like we shared previously, if you want to get the value of if you want to get the keys of that dictionary, you can just print x, while we use square bracket to retrieve the values of the key. So we'll see the values from George to the list, and then we'll see the values, male, gender, reverse, origin, etc. We can look through a dictionary using the .value method to retrieve the values of that dictionary. So if we use using the student info dictionary, we can say for x in student info.value, print x. This gives us the values of those dictionaries. We can do something similar to retrieve the keys of that dictionary. So if we say for x in student info.key, this time we are using the keys method to retrieve the keys of that dictionary. We can say print x like so, and we have the keys of that dictionary. We can also loop through using the item method to get the key value pairs of that dictionary. For example, if we say for x in student info.item, print x, if we run it, we'll get the key value pairs of those dictionaries. And that's a wrap for part 3 of our Python training series. Make sure to check out part 1 and part 2 if you haven't already, and explore the rest of our other friendly series, including Python Functions Simplified, Object-Oriented Programming Made Easy, NumPy Simplified, Pandas Made Simple, Super Simple PySpark Tutorial for Data Science, Matplotlib and Seaborn Simplified, SQL Simplified, Understanding Data Modeling and Schema Design, ETL and Data Pipeline Concepts Explained, Essential Cloud Data Platforms. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Have a question or suggestion, drop it in the comment. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and keep learning. Have an awesome day.